Tuesday evening. Well, say evening, it's 20 past 5. I tend to work 11:30 to 3:30. I do 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, which I think, bearing in mind I'm 64, I'm not going to be working on a building site, am I? My body's wearing down as it does. But I like to do it because it keeps me in shape. But what I'm mindful of, particularly with the problems I've had in the last couple of years with knees and some of the muscles at the bottom of my spine, which crippled me for a long while. I was on a morphine derivative just to move around. It was not good. But I've learnt now to manage things. So whatever job I approach, before diving into it, I think, will this hurt me in 3 days' time? And if it will, should I get help or should I ask somebody else to do it? Because there are limits to what you can do. But I've got a bit of a project this evening. I'm going to tell you all about it. Welcome to Ralph's house. Yeah, if you remember, in last week's episode, in fact, put the diesel heater in. That's not what's running, by the way. This is the power supply. It's a 12-volt power supply with a fan on it, and the reason it's running is it is temporarily powering my solar circuit, which normally runs off my batteries and my solar panels. But because I want to move a load of cabling around, and it's dark, and I still want the lights on, I've just given it this 12-volt supply. Cheapest chips these are. Again, Chinese. But anyway, that's why that's there. And if you remember, I did all this. Actually, I probably do kiss better than I cook. I shall have to ask the ladies. Actually, no, I think they would agree with me. Yeah, I kiss better than I cook. I've got that window done. And I'd started to paint around here. I've painted all up here, and I want to get painted up here because I've got this kitchen maid arriving, that hoists your laundry up so you can dry it. And as I say, with the diesel heater, that's going to pay me to do that. But there are some things that don't really go on a kitchen maid, either because they're too heavy or whatever. And I mentioned last week, there's this screw up here. And for whatever reason, I'll talk about that wire as well in a minute. This screw up here, I don't know what it was one my dad put in, or even my sister possibly, because she lived here before him. And I hung a coat hanger on that with a coat that had just come out of the washing machine. Very short wash. I don't wash coats for any length of time, but even after spinning it a little bit, it was still very damp. And with the heater on all night, it dried out by the morning, so I was quite pleased with that. So I thought, well, what's needed here is a hidden rail for, maybe hidden, a hidden rail for hanging up coat hangers when you've got something like that, like a coat or something like that. Because where do you put them, especially in winter? You're either got to shove it through the tumble dryer and risk shrinking it or doing some other kind of damage to it, or it sits around the house for days until it dries out. It's just not great. So I thought, it's all practical. Are you getting used to me or not? You should be by now. I was going to put a rail on here that you can hook on coat hangers. When you haven't got coat hangers on it, you wouldn't really notice it. So some while back, when I was working on my Gunter Wolf Bingolet, I needed a coin tube. And this stuff is just perfect, really. But it's only about £4.50. You can get it in B&Q. I don't know what it's described as, but basically it's the sort of rail you'd put in a wardrobe, taking your coat hangers on. But they're only about £4.50, and that is, I would say, about 1.5 meters, something like that. But also, in a box of junk at work, I found a couple of these things, and by pure luck they fit. Now this is how I tend to look at things. Right, whoop, nearly dropped it. See, it's all live. If it was hung on there, well, you're not really going to get the hangers on too well. It would work, however, and this isn't all beam, you have got some leeway here, but you could hang it underneath, but again you've got only about, oh, I don't know, not even a centimetre gap above the rail. But if you then mount them on wooden blocks like that, you've got plenty of clearance, haven't you? And I'll paint these so they match the ceiling and whatever, so they disappear. But that's what I thought I'd do. £4.50, and then I've got myself a rail. It could go on the back behind here, because actually there's a piece of wood still screwed to that, this thing here, because my dad divided off this part of the kitchen. I never quite understood what he was trying to do, but anyway, that is wood, and I can screw it onto that, and I can screw it on that way so it tucks out the way so you don't see it. That's what I'm thinking anyway, at the same time as I do the kitchen maid. So this is why I'm sort of on a bit of a push to paint this end, even if I don't touch the rest of the kitchen. If I can get this bit done, we can use it. And the only thing that would be below it, you notice now I've turned the chest freezer that way because it fits in that gap nicely. It's not going to get in the way, is it? And even if I lift the lid up, that's not going to come anywhere near any washing above it. I'll tell you something though, I do not like the finish on chest freezers, because it's just cheaply coated in stuff, isn't it? And it's not very practical. You can't cut on it, you know, you'll damage it. So what I'm looking around for is a material that you don't see a lot today, but I remember it from the old days, and people of my age will remember it, as laminates and things first came in, was a thing called I've just forgotten the name, Formica. Anybody remember that stuff? They used it in the 50s and 60s. All their tables were coated with that. It's really hard wearing stuff. Crikey, you'd have to take a saw to it to make a mark on that. Someone somewhere has got a sheet of, they still make Formica, and I was going to cut it so it fits just on that top all the way around. I don't know what colour or finish I'd get, but I would literally stick that down, and then that surface is usable, rather than just having a big area like that in your kitchen that you can't use, you can't cut anything on it, you can't do anything. I thought, yeah, we can use that surface then, it's next to a surface. So if I wanted to, I could come down and chop onions. Well, maybe not when I got washing up there, but yeah. So anyway, I've pulled this out basically so I can get, and it's not very well lit down here, so it's going to look a bit grainy. That was, I had a strip of wood along there, I've already taken that off. There are roll plugs in the wall which I have to punch back in and then fill over with plaster, but I've also got to get the rest of this paper off. Paper down there, paper down there. I've already stripped that bit and already got some paint on it. I know I'm doing it kind of piecemeal, but it's what I can do in the hours I've got, isn't it? So that's my plan, to kind of use this as a very eco linen area, because the cost is low. If I'm running the diesel heater, it's not costing much to dry it, well, pennies. And any washing we put down here is not going to get in the way, because I do have a clothes horse. Bought one out of Aldi, I think it was. I think it was about £30. It's all right, but you know, it's, at the end of the day, they're just wire things coated in white plastic, aren't they? And more to the point, they irritate me, because my son, who's 19, and like most youngsters, doesn't think, oh, I could do a bit of washing today. They don't think that. They think, oh, I've got to get online with my friends, or I've got to do this, or I've got to go out. Washing is the last thing on their mind, and it's, I have to work quite hard, I might add, to remind him of these things, because as he gets older, he's going to have to be on top of it, because in the end, he's going to have to do it himself, isn't he? So you've got to make your kids self-sufficient. But as I say, he piles his washing up, and of course when it comes through the machine, there's way too much to get dry, because he's left it so long. And what really annoys me is there's nowhere to put the closed door. So wherever we put it, you're going to fall over it or you've got to squeeze around it, and I don't like that. So hence the idea of a kitchen maid. I think the one I've ordered's got 6 rails on it, which should be enough. And it's 115 centimetres, so it's just over a metre, isn't it? Which is just slightly longer than that, but of course I can cut it down a bit just to fit the space, which is what I'll do. And then we'll decide where we're going to hook it from, probably from this side, because you have to tie it up, don't you? So that'll be all the laundry sorted for the winter, which has always been a problem. During the summer it's not so bad, you know, I've got a rotary washing line, you can put it out there, that's all right if you dodge the rain. But yeah, I think this is a practical solution to that, which will all tie in with a cheaper way of heating the house. I've reduced the electric as much as I can. As I say, all the lights now run on solar, but it leaves me with lots of sort of decisions to make, because of course all these, this is dead by the way, well it's not dead but it's disconnected, a 240 volt line. Do I retain those and run a 12 volt one alongside it, or do I just say to myself, well sod it, it's my house, I'll just run 12 volt through these and they'll just go on the 12 volt circuit? And that's largely what I've done with most of the solar lighting in here. But of course anybody that comes along after me is going to say, well, why does that go there? And well, I'll have to draw a map, won't I? You know, I'll end up like my dad, his wiring was like that. Yes, so after I've rambled on for a considerable amount of time, and you've probably long since gone and thought, I can't listen to this guy anymore. Apart from Ben Humphries, he seems to like my channel. He says, I like your sort of upbeat approach to it. Yeah, well, I always hope that some of my ideas will rub off on people. Which brings me, well actually I said I was going to talk about this. There's a kitchen light, I won't bother pointing at it because it will flare at the camera, but there's a kitchen light that way, but this cable runs, and it's been like this for years, but the cable's alright. I think it goes in here, right, it comes out, you see there's some conduit over the top. I boxed the top of this door in, and originally when I moved in here there was like a wooden box that sat above this door, which didn't stop any heat getting out at all. It was just ridiculous. So, and I thought, well, I won't cut this cable in case I need it, and good job I didn't, but I'll run it through conduit after it's in, and I can actually lift the cover of that and get access to the cable if I wanted to. But anyway, it seems to go there, goes out the other side, and then comes out up under my bathroom floor and appears on the landing. So I'm thinking, well, as I've got a light that way, why don't I fit a fluorescent LED light along here and tap it into the same switch, so when you put the kitchen light on, the 2 lights come on? Or just maybe a sensor this end, so this one only comes on when you walk down this end. That might be a little bit eco. So although that wire is not connected to anything at the moment, I do know where it comes out, and I do know that I can hook into it. Also, yes, Ben asked me on YouTube, because last week I went to Clacton in Essex to see some dear friends of mine, because I lived out there for 25 years. Really enjoyed it. In fact, I'm coming back down again in April, probably for about a week, something like that, to catch up with the ones that I didn't manage to get around to seeing. But one of the bands, well, 2 bands we saw, but one of the bands we went to see, my son and I, and it was the first time he'd seen a live band, was Gong. Now Gong I have followed, and you think, who the hell's that? Gong I've followed since about 1979, 1980, and prior to that point, this is why it's often difficult for me to relate to some people, depending on their music tastes. And I say that because I tend to think, well, especially if I meet somebody and say, well, I like this in the charts and I like that, and I think, yeah, well, they're unimaginative people, aren't they? They really haven't explored the world at all. Prior to that, I was I used to like 10cc as a youth. I still do, love their stuff. But but I hadn't really been exposed to the full world of music, and most people haven't been. It's just what they hear on the radio and that sort of stuff, stuff they might stumble across, but they haven't really explored it. And a friend of mine who's now dead, Sean, came round one day with an album under his arm, and it was an album called Camembert Electrique.
Gong. I'm on the planet Gong.
This is the album cover for it. I think it's about 1971. And he said, have a listen to this. And he put it on, and I wasn't sure what to make of it the first time. Listened to it the second time, and I thought, I have not heard anything like this. Nothing at all. But I really like it. I like the feeling of it. I like the sentiment of it. And over the years, I bought many Gong albums and introduced lots of my friends into it as well, which has been good. People I haven't seen in years will say, oh, I've still got Flying Teapot, or I've still got Angel's Egg, or whatever album it is they've got. So that fundamentally changed my taste in music. And the thing with Gong is it was always a big family of musicians, so you can tie it in very well with Hawkwind. Some of their band members played with Gong and vice versa, and the same with the band Here and Now. Used to do a lot of free festivals. I think Hawkwind used to play on the back of a lorry when they first started. I'm sure they did. And more recently, perhaps, the Osric Tentacles, which is the modern day equivalent of it. So you kind of listen to any of those bands and they are all interlinked. And that's how come, I suppose, I got into Gong. And from that I progressed into, I was living in Colchester at the time and feeling a bit under the weather. Life wasn't treating me particularly well, but a friend of mine said, oh, we're going to set up this sort of mini pirate radio station. I thought, oh, okay, the type of thing, tape recorder and an aerial slung up a tree. It was very amateur, and I did an hour show playing the sort of music I played, and but the rest were playing. It was frustrating. Anyway, just sort of hits of the 60s and 70s, whatever. And I said to the guy I was doing this with, I don't want to do any more of this because you're trying to appeal to the masses, when really I think you should be appealing to a minority and build it into the masses. And we kind of fell out of it, fell out over that for a little while. That was Gary Lee. But months later he came back to me. No, it might have been even a year later. He came back, he said, I've been thinking about your show. And I said, oh yeah. He said, can we do that sort of full time with that kind of music? And I went, yeah, absolutely. Now, as time has evolved, and I would hand on heart say that, and Gary was much younger than me. I was in my 20s, mid-20s I think. He was about 18 at the most, I would have thought. And he used to be a DJ in the very early days, doing clubs, that sort of stuff. But now his knowledge of music is far greater than mine. It's wonderful, actually. I mean, that's one of the things I like about Gary. But more fundamentally, he's the best alternative radio DJ I've ever heard of. I've ever listened to. He's really good. And some years later, when I was in Colchester, I went to a BBC radio night. It was at the Leisure Centre in Colchester. There were various people there, including BBC Essex's DJ, Dave Monk, who spoke like that. They do, don't they, on commercial radio? I don't know why they don't speak like it. Imagine coming home and saying, hello, darling, I'm home. But they do. They speak this sort of phony voice. And you find that a lot in local BBC stations. And anyway, he was there for the evening. And we were just briefly talking. He said, oh, why are you here? And I said, well, I work in alternative radio. He said, oh, that. I was furious. I just launched into him and said, you do realise, Mr. Monk, that whatever we're doing now, you're going to be doing in 20 years' time, because we're way ahead of you. Which was true. and why I got into alternative radio, because if you're really good at radio, you make masses of use of the medium, because it's all in the listener's head, so you can convince them of anything really. Whereas commercial radio, completely different thing. All the records are chosen for you, you've got no say in any of it, and all you're doing is just waffling in between. I can't see much point in doing that as an occupation. Whereas an alternative, you get to choose what you're going to play and the right thing for the moment. But I do still do a bit, and this is my last year in alternative radio, because well, actually my producer Gary, but yeah, he's my producer now, he said, why, have you run out of music? Which is you can't argue with that. I said, well, no, but it's about commitment, and certainly if you're working in radio you do need a commitment. And I just felt I was coming to 64 and I just wanted to shed a lot of things that would tie me up, because I don't know how many years I've got in front of me, and I want to do things for myself now. You know, I write a great deal, and I'll talk more about that in the next Ralph's House, about what I do and what I have done and my experience, including being a college lecturer. I'll talk about that more next time, but I just wanted to explain how I got into that sort of music and what it led on to. So hopefully, Ben, that kind of explains that. Right, moving on. Looks like a cricket bat, doesn't it? Giant one. Yeah, this is the kitchen maid. And actually, judging by the length each side, because I haven't got shelves on this wall anymore, I've got a good 4 inches that end, a good 5 inches that end. So if I level it up, that's going to be a perfect fit in there. I've already cut the address label off, but I think it's going to take quite a while with a knife, cutting this all apart to get in it and being careful not to cut any of the ropes. Anyway, we'll get all that apart and then we'll see what we've got in the kit. There's the kit unfolded. I've got 6 slats in this kit. This is 115 centimetres, which is, you know, it's over a metre, isn't it? You get 2 pulley wheels, one of which is a double pulley and one of which is a single pulley. And I'll show you all that when I've got it up. Couple of screws for this, which apparently is known as a cleat. You'll be careful how you pronounce that, haven't you? And the 2 cast iron brackets. These are heavy. Well, they would be if they're cast iron. I have to say, oh, and the necessary rope. Looks like good quality stuff. I will, because a friend of mine asked me, come on, focus. This is the trouble with low light, isn't it? A friend of mine asked how much this was. And I think it was about £47-48, something like that, which I thought was an excellent deal. And I really did look through a lot of these, but this was about the best in terms of price. And I got it on eBay, but I'm going to put their shop name we'll put it there, right? So if you want one of these, that's where to get it from. But looks good, doesn't it? It's not a cheap affair, I can tell you that. Not in its construction. It looks very well made indeed. These you screw into the ceiling. I've got a bit of calculating to do, because this is a flat roof. I don't want to find and go straight through the felt on top. So I've got to work out from outside the depth of that and how much clearance I've got between there and the felt. I should imagine there's a gap and it's boarded underneath, so I should think I've got enough room. Right, so we've got to get 2 fixings on the ceiling. That's the 2 pulley wheels. They've got to be screwed in. Now, you can't screw that into plasterboard, because otherwise, by the time you've got 5 pairs of socks on it, it'll come off the ceiling. It's got to be sturdier than that. It has to go into a beam. But this is a flat roof, and we don't know where the beams are, do we? Not visually. So there's kind of 3 ways that I know of you can do it. You can use a stud finder, and I do have one, but they're not always successful stud finders. I may dig it out just to verify things. this is the rough and ready way. And you tap around to see that sound. Good chance there's a beam there, but they could be running that way or they could be running that way. The other way you can do it is with one of these. Right, see this corner here, that is a neodymium, come on focus, a neodymium magnet. But look, see how that sticks on that corner, because it's got one of those metal strips that protect the corners. So the plaster goes up and over it. Because, you know, if I go here it doesn't stick at all, but as soon as I get to that corner it sticks. And the reason why we use one of those is flat roofs are a kind of sandwich, aren't they? So on the outer side you've got exterior shuttering ply, quite thick stuff with felt over the top of it. Then you've got your beams, and then usually, I say usually, you can never tell in older houses, they tack on plasterboard from underneath and they nail it up. And obviously they would have nailed it into the joists or the beams, otherwise the thing would have fallen down, wouldn't it? So we use one of these neodymium magnets where we think the beams might be, and run across it with your fingers until this magnet sticks, because when it sticks you know there's a nail just under the plaster, because they fit these, then they fill over the nail holes afterwards. They just knock them in slightly. So that's what I'm going to do, and when I find a nail I'm going to put a small pencil mark, and I shall do it in, I don't know, a small area just to get me started, and then I'll know exactly where the beams are and I will know where to screw up those pulleys. Oh, something's arrived in the post. What can it possibly be in a big box like that? Oh, there's a scale from my hand. Deliberately obscured the address label, obviously. I'll tell you what it is. It's another diesel heater. Yeah, seriously. Why have you ordered another diesel heater, Ralph? Really simple. I'm not the only one that's done this. It's called redundancy, and because when you think the price of a gas boiler and all the radiators and all the rest of it, you're talking thousands, aren't you? And these are only 90 quid each. That's what I got this one for. They've dropped considerably over the last few months. They were at one point about 140, 150. Now you can pick them up for as little as this. In actual fact, if you don't have the one in the case, you can get them for about 70 quid. I kid you not. Yeah, redundancy, because I figure if I have a problem with my diesel heater, well, it's always possible, isn't it? And you don't want it in the middle of winter, do you? Really easy to change it out for another one. So rather than have to mess about with the diesel heater that I've got, not that I'm expecting a breakdown, I can just swap the whole thing over and we're off and running. And then when I've got more time, I can have a look at the one that's got a problem. So that's what it is. It's another diesel heater. Oh, and this one's got a funky blue exhaust. Yeah, they all vary a bit, you know, but they're all made in China and all based on a, is it a Westbasto? Is it, I don't know how you pronounce it. Don't know, I've never owned one. Not one of these anyway. Not in a camper. I've used the ones that run on Calagas. In fact, that's what I've got in my camper, and then I've got a huge tank under the back seat, which by the way is still full of gas. I'm going to have to find a use for that. Well, maybe I'll bring that out and run it on Cala, use up my Cala supply. I've got enough to last a winter, I should think. But these run on diesel, as you know, and so I bought a spare one for exactly that purpose, and I will be testing that at some point in the next Ralph's house. In fact, what I might do is just set one up from scratch and show you how the whole thing works. That would be fun, wouldn't it? All right. Oh yeah, back to the kitchen maid. Well, the kitchen maid's in, but it did not go according to plan. I'll tell you for why. This ceiling up here, and you can see I tried to drill a hole there and another one there. There's no way any drill bit is going into that, and I'll tell you for why. That is about 4 inches of concrete. It is not plasterboard nailed to battens. Good discovery, I suppose. And I guess that's why the outside has been felted, because, you know, this flat roof would have been put on in the 1930s, and maybe it was starting to let in water, I don't know. But anyway, that's what it is. It's a concrete roof with a felt top on it, and then it's been plastered underneath. So there's no way I can fix that to this, but I could fix it to this wooden board that sits down here. So what I shall do is continue filling this gap and getting the whole thing smooth, so that board will look part of this beam. I certainly didn't want to screw into this, because there is a support beam in there, steel one, and then it's been boxed in by this plasterboard and mesh, and you wouldn't really get a strong enough fixing on that, but I will on that board, because of course it's been screwed in various places to give it some strength. So that's what we ended up doing. Things don't always go according to plan. Otherwise everything else is painted. That's not a hole in the wall, that's a lead. Boiler's quite noisy today because it's -2 outside, and yet this is the temperature inside. So I'm absolutely right in that these diesel heaters will heat a whole house, providing you leave all your doors open. We had no problem last night, so just left the bedroom doors open, just let the heat through. You know, throughout the year you're not going to get as cold a period of time as this. It's only for a few months in the winter, isn't it? But there we go, about 20p an hour to run that, so I'm happy. Not the most exciting rails house, but I'm glad you stuck with me. See you in the next one. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.